Okay, so picture this. You're at a birthday party. Maybe it's your own, maybe it's a coworker's, and someone brings a cake out with 55 candles on it, and everyone laughs because honestly, the fire hazard is real at that point, and you're standing there smiling, holding a paper plate, and somewhere in the back of your mind, a little voice goes, "Wait, how much money am I actually supposed to have by now?" And then, just as fast as it showed up, you shove that thought back down because you'd rather think about literally anything else: the cake, the playlist, your cousin's terrible haircut, anything. Sound familiar? Because honestly, I think almost everyone has had that exact moment, that quiet stomach drop second where you do some rough math in your head and you're not sure if you should be relieved or start quietly panicking in the bathroom. My name is Steve, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and why some people seem to glide toward retirement feeling calm and prepared, while other people, equally smart, equally hardworking people, feel like they're sprinting on a treadmill that never actually gets them anywhere. And here's the thing I want to tell you right up front, before we go any further. The number you're picturing right now, the one that's stressing you out, it's probably wrong. Not wrong because it's too high. Wrong because the whole framing of the number is kind of a trap. And by the end of this video, I think you're going to see your own retirement, and honestly, your own age, completely differently. Because age 55 isn't the finish line. It's not even close. It's more like the last real turn before the final stretch of the race, the point where you can still adjust your stride, still catch your breath, still make meaningful changes, but only if you actually know where you stand. So let's figure out where you stand. Together. No judgment, I promise. So if you've Googled this before, and let's be honest, you probably have, probably at like 11 p.m. lying in bed, phone way too close to your face. You've seen some version of you should have 7 times your salary saved by 55, or aim for 8 times your income, or some other tidy little multiple that some financial company slapped on an infographic. And look, these numbers aren't useless. They're not lying to you exactly, but they're flattening something that's actually really personal into something that feels universal, and that's where the anxiety creeps in. Here's a simple way to think about it. Imagine 2 people, both 55 years old. One of them makes $80,000 a year, has a paid-off house, no kids left to support, and plans to retire in a smallish town. The other person makes $80,000 a year too, but they're still paying a mortgage. They've got 2 kids they're helping through college. And they live in a city where a decent 1-bedroom apartment costs more than some people's entire monthly salary elsewhere. Same income. Wildly, wildly different retirement pictures. So when some chart says you need $600,000 saved by 55, it's kind of like a doctor telling every single person in the waiting room the exact same dosage of medicine, regardless of their weight, their history, what else they're dealing with. It's a starting point, not a diagnosis. Now, with that said, and I do want to give you something concrete here because vague reassurance doesn't pay your bills, a commonly cited benchmark from major financial institutions suggests something like 7 to 8 times your annual salary by age 55 to 60. If you're making $70,000 a year, that's somewhere around $490,000 to $560,000. Does that number make your chest tighten a little? Take a breath. We're going to unpack why that number is less scary than it looks, and more importantly, what actually moves the needle if you're behind it. Because here's my actual takeaway from this section, and I want you to hold on to it. The multiple of salary rule is a compass, not a map. It tells you roughly which direction to walk. It doesn't tell you every twist and turn of your specific path. Your job isn't to hit some arbitrary stranger's number. It's to understand your own number based on your own life. And we're going to build that in the next section. All right, let's get a little more hands-on here because I don't want to just hand you anxiety and abstract percentages and send you on your way. Honestly, that's kind of a jerk move. And I've watched too many finance videos do exactly that. So here's a rough framework, and it's not perfect. Nothing about personal finance math is perfect, but it'll get you somewhere useful. Start with your expected annual retirement expenses. A lot of people use something like 70 to 80% of their current income as a rough guess. The idea being you won't be commuting anymore, you probably won't be saving for retirement anymore since, well, you're in it, and hopefully your mortgage is paid off or close to it. But, and this is important, some people actually spend more in early retirement because suddenly they have all this time and they want to travel, they want to finally build that woodworking shop, they want to spoil their grandkids rotten. So don't just blindly apply that percentage. Sit with it for a second. What does your life actually look like without a job attached to it? Once you've got a rough annual number, there's this thing called the 4% rule. And stick with me here, it's simpler than it sounds. The idea is that if you withdraw about 4% of your total retirement savings each year, adjusted for inflation, your money should reasonably last around 30 years. It's not gospel, economists argue about it constantly, but it's a useful rough guide. So if you think you'll need, say, $50,000 a year in retirement, you divide that by 4%, which is the same as multiplying by 25. And you get $1.25 million as a rough target. I know. That number probably just made some of you want to close this video and go lie face down on the carpet for a while. Stay with me though, because here's the part that actually matters. That's your full retirement number, not your age 55 number. At 55, you're not supposed to be at the finish line. You're supposed to be somewhere in the last mile, with room left to adjust your pace. Let me tell you about a guy. I'll call him Dave, because there's always a Dave in these stories, right? Dave was 55, worked in logistics for almost 30 years, and he came to realize he had maybe 60% of what he actually needed. And his first reaction, understandably, was pure panic, like actual sleepless nights. But here's what changed things for him. He didn't need to somehow conjure the other 40% out of thin air immediately. He needed a plan for the next 10 years. And 10 years, even with modest returns, is enough time to genuinely transform a retirement account if you're consistent. That's the actionable piece here. Don't just calculate the scary total number and then freeze. Break it into where am I now, where do I need to be, and how many working years do I realistically have left to close that gap. That third piece is the one most people skip, and it's honestly the one that turns despair into a plan. Okay, can we pause the spreadsheets for a second? Because I think there's something way more important happening underneath all this math, and it's something almost nobody actually addresses directly. Turning 55 and confronting your retirement savings isn't just a math problem. It's an identity problem. It's confronting a version of yourself. A younger you, a 28-year-old you who maybe had student loans and a car payment and thought, hey, I'll start saving seriously later. And now you're standing here at 55 having an uncomfortable conversation with a decision that person made decades ago. And there's this weird shame that creeps in, right? Like you should have known better, like everyone else somehow figured this out, and you're the one who's behind. Here's the truth, though, and I say this with genuine care. You are not the outlier you think you are. A significant portion of people approaching retirement age feel underprepared. It's not some rare personal failure. It's basically the default state for a huge chunk of the population, largely because of stagnant wages, rising costs of living, medical bills, kids, life just happening the way life does. I think about it kind of like this. Imagine you're on a road trip and you plan to arrive somewhere by 6 p.m., but traffic happened. You had to stop for a flat tire. Maybe you took a wrong turn somewhere around your early 30s. You don't respond to that by pulling over and giving up on the destination entirely. You recalculate the route. You maybe drive a little faster where it's safe to. You cut out the extra stops. You still get there, just with an adjusted plan. The emotional trap here is thinking that being behind means you're doomed, and that thought alone causes a kind of paralysis where people just stop looking at their accounts altogether. Ostrich mode, head in the sand. And that's honestly the most expensive mistake you can make, because time is the one thing you can't buy back. So here's my actionable piece for this section, and it's less about spreadsheets and more about mindset. Give yourself permission to be behind without giving yourself permission to stay behind. Those are two very different things. One is self-compassion, the other is self-sabotage wearing a comfortable disguise. All right, let's get practical again, because I did promise you actionable stuff and I intend to deliver. Between 55 and, say, 65, which is roughly when a lot of people are aiming to retire, though that number is shifting later for plenty of folks, you actually have some genuinely powerful tools available that younger savers don't. First one, catch-up contributions. If you're 50 and older, most retirement accounts let you contribute more than the standard limit. It's basically the government going, "Hey, we know a lot of people get serious about this later than they should. Here's some extra room." Not everyone takes advantage of this, and that's honestly a shame because it's one of the more direct ways to accelerate your savings in these final working years. Second, this might be the decade to get brutally honest about your expenses. Not in a joyless, deprive yourself of everything you love kind of way. I'm not going to sit here and tell you to stop buying coffee. That's such a tired, almost insulting piece of advice at this point. I'm talking about the bigger stuff. Do you actually need that size of house anymore? If the kids have moved out, is there a subscription service you forgot you were even paying for? Small leaks sink big ships, as the saying goes, and in your 50s, plugging those leaks has an outsized effect because you've got less runway for compound growth to do the heavy lifting for you. Third, and this one surprises people, consider whether working just a little longer, even part-time, even in a reduced capacity, changes your entire equation. There's this myth that retirement is binary, like a light switch, on one day and off the next. But a lot of people are finding real peace in a more gradual wind down. Working 2 or 3 more years, or working part-time for a stretch, doesn't just add income, it also shrinks the number of years your savings actually need to cover, and it delays when you start drawing down your accounts. That's a double win. And it's honestly one of the most underrated levers in this whole conversation. And fourth, think seriously about when you claim things like Social Security, if that applies to your situation. Claiming earlier gets you money sooner, sure, but claiming later, up to a certain point, increases your monthly benefit pretty significantly. It's not a one-size-fits-all decision. It depends on your health, your other income, your family history, but it's worth a real conversation, maybe even with a financial advisor, rather than just defaulting to the earliest possible date because waiting feels uncomfortable. I think what ties all 4 of these together is this idea that your 50s aren't a passive decade where you just watch a number on a screen and hope. It's actually a decade where small, deliberate decisions compound into something that meaningfully changes your retirement quality of life. It's not about panic. It's about precision. Last section here, and I think this one might actually be the most important, even though it's the least mathematical. We've been talking this whole time about numbers, multiples of salary, 4% rules, catch-up contributions, and all of that matters, genuinely. But I want to zoom out for a second, because I think a lot of retirement anxiety comes from chasing a number that isn't actually connected to the life you want to live. Some people need less than they think because they've built a life around relationships and simple pleasures rather than constant spending. Other people genuinely need more because travel matters deeply to them, or because they want to leave something behind for their kids, or because health considerations mean they need a bigger cushion. Neither of these is wrong, but you have to actually know which version of retirement you're building toward, or you're just chasing a number pulled from a stranger's spreadsheet. I'll be honest with you, I've talked to people who had, by conventional standards, enough saved, and they were still miserable and anxious because they never actually defined what enough meant to them personally. And I've talked to people with objectively less who felt completely at peace because their version of retirement was modest, intentional, and fully theirs. So here's the actionable takeaway, and it's maybe the softest one in this whole video, but I think it might be the one that matters most. Sit down, maybe this week, and actually picture a Tuesday in your retirement, not a highlight reel vacation day, a regular Tuesday. What are you doing? Who's around? What does that day cost? That exercise will tell you more about your real number than any calculator will. So let's bring this all the way back around, because I know we covered a lot of ground here. The truth is, there's no single magic number that applies to everyone at 55. The 7 times your salary guideline is a useful compass, not a personal verdict on how well you've lived your life. What actually matters is understanding your own expenses, your own timeline, and being honest, really honest, about the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And if you found out today that you're behind, I want you to hear this clearly. That's not a life sentence. It's information. It's a starting point for the next decade of decisions, and honestly, the fact that you're even here watching this, thinking about it seriously instead of avoiding it, that already puts you ahead of a huge number of people who just don't look. Your 50s aren't the end of the story. They're this quiet, powerful chapter where small adjustments, catching up on contributions, trimming a little fat from your budget, maybe working a couple extra years, thinking carefully about when to claim benefits, genuinely reshape everything that comes after. So do the math. Feel whatever you need to feel about it, even if that's uncomfortable for a minute. And then, gently, without panic, without shame, start making the next right move. That's really all any of us can do. One steady, deliberate step at a time toward a Tuesday you actually want to live.